Well, thank you, and I'm happy to be here. I'd like to start with a little introduction. So again, my name's Michael Ferris. I'm Vice President of Business Architecture at RedHat, and this means several things, and most importantly, it means that I go out and I talk to customers globally, and I also work very closely with significant cloud provider partners, including Alibaba. And one of the observations that we've made is that we're seeing customers move to the public clouds, and you'll see me later talk about hybrid clouds in a very significant way that changes not only the technology, but also the pace of innovation that they're going through. And so what I'd like to take you through today is a discussion of what customers are doing and what's changing that innovation within their organizations. And then secondly, introduce what RedHat's concept of cloud means and how we're addressing that with our customers. And then finally end on an overview of the technologies that we engage with in this cloud environment. So first, if you think back just a few short years ago, and if you remember, you used to have an IT department. This department was the sole provider of innovation and technology for the organizations that RedHat certainly has been working with. This means that that group was specifically responsible for procuring hardware whenever a new system was needed, finding the right ISVs, validating and supporting the partners that an enterprise used for those configurations. And anytime somebody wanted to make changes, they had to go through that IT department. This ended up being a pretty significant bottleneck in the industry. And so if you looked at what IT was doing, the focus was very much controlling that technology innovation. But now if you look at what's happening, technology is everywhere. Whether you're a bank, whether you're in the healthcare industry, government industries, really focusing on technology is branched outside of individual groups in IT and focused on the actual users of the technology and having groups that actually can make those changes in the industry. And it can belong to anyone. One of the core observations that we've had as we've been speaking with our customers is that it's no longer even the business units that are driving a lot of the changes and technology needs for the organization. We're hearing increasingly that it's the partners of our customers, and even more so, it's the users that those customers are serving that are driving those technology changes. Whether it's coming from individual mobile applications and the types of configurations that customers have that they're working with our partners and our customers, or even through to other partners of partners in this industry. So when I look at how the changes have evolved and how technology is starting to really drive these, we see a significant amount of innovation happening outside of even our customer base, which in turn is forcing our customers to find ways to react to that and build new platforms for their customers. And this is really because technology is everywhere and it's part of everything. So again, if you think back to the IT group that was really driving this, they were the sole provider of innovation and technology in organizations. Now it's out to the users, it's out to the customers of our customers looking across this, but it's really coming from the industry itself. Whether you're talking about the media or healthcare industries looking at different ways of analyzing big data, specifically finding ways of new transactions, new technologies that are emerging that all of these customers and all these industries really want to start providing and using in their environments. It really becomes something that everything everyone is doing now is technology. It's no longer reserved for a select few in the industry. And most importantly, we see this as creating disruption. So specifically in RedHat's case, we started in the Linux world. So in early 2000s, after Red Hat Linux and after the movement of Linux has really started to mature a significant technology base, we started to see our customers really start at the edge of network. So taking our Linux products and using those to run file or print servers, specifically starting to grow that into a platform that a broad set of users inside their organizations could have and use. Well, over time, those file and print servers started to turn into VPNs. They then started to turn into database servers. And eventually it's turned into a platform that the Linux technology itself was running the significant enterprise applications, the mission-critical workloads for these companies. And all of a sudden, you had this environment where customers or users of Linux were looking for a solution where they could have a partner they could work with that would manage those platforms, that would give them the technologies that they needed to be able to run them, and ultimately support and certify those as they started to branch out, because you certainly couldn't have a mission-critical application go down. And so this disruption in the industry that Red Hat started to notice, we really capitalized on when we started to build out our Linux platforms and focus on how do we actually engage customers in a way that allows them to disrupt their existing platforms. And specifically in the early 2000s, we were focused on Solaris and Sun hardware environments. And so over this time, this technology disrupt, and in 2016, McKinsey did a study and started to understand and analyze how you can start looking toward this disruption cycle. Most importantly in this, they reflected a lot of what we had seen in the early 2000s, where the technology typically starts with a small grassroots movement and then expands over time into something like we saw in the database and the mission-critical applications that were using Linux. But the most important point that this study did is it looked at the business models that customers and partners were engaging in this. And so as that technology got used internally and then also exposed externally across these customers, it's the companies that were aware and actually adapted their business models to what was happening in that innovation and that change in their organization that succeeded. The other ones who weren't watching for this ended up failing. And Red Hat, the company that I've been with now for 17 years, focused heavily on this. And we saw that in the Linux industry itself, being able to adapt different business models for how Linux would be used and how open source ultimately would become part of the problem, which leads to the real question of really what's driving a lot of this change. And from our perspective, it is open source. And so if you look at the amount of innovation that's been happening in the open source community, and driving new technologies and new platforms, anywhere from Android all the way back through OpenStack, looking at even core things like the Linux kernel itself. The focus here has been, how do you take this motivation that exists in the open source community and really drive it into something that a broad swath of the market can use? This is what we see as the thing that is driving this technology change and this innovation need and this disruption that's happening in the industry is this collaborative group of millions of developers working across more than 1 million projects in the open source community to really start innovating. And even if you look back over the past 5 or 6 years, a lot of the projects and pretty much anything major that's been happening in the technology space has come out of open source, including things like the Alibaba Cloud. And we see this day in and day out where our customers are driving things that are coming from ideas matured in the open source community, and all of a sudden they want a way of working with a vendor such as Red Hat to be able to provide those solutions across multiple environments. And so that leads me to a discussion of what Red Hat is and our vision behind all of this. So specifically, just to introduce Red Hat, if you're not familiar, we are a global provider of open source solutions. We're the largest and oldest open source company in the world that has been providing enterprise IT solutions. We're about a $2.5 billion annual company with over 11,000 employees globally, including offices in China as well as rest of ASEAN and certainly all over Europe and North America. Our focus is really on enterprise companies. And so we are in the Fortune 500, almost all of them at this point. Pretty much any enterprise organization that is looking for open source solutions comes to Red Hat first. But most importantly, if you look at our portfolio and what we do, we're not just a Linux company. I'll introduce you to the breadth of technologies that we provide. But the focus here is, how can we maintain this base that we started with when we started with Linux, actually in the early 90s, and matured that to an enterprise solution that you see today, and how does that apply to the cloud? Well, first, our focus certainly is on how do we take these millions of projects that exist, these open source community projects, and mature them to something that an enterprise can actually deploy and rely upon day in and day out? Well, Red Hat's core investment, the thing that we really do, is we take these projects and we put developers on them. In the early days, when it was just Red Hat Enterprise Linux, our primary focus was on the Linux kernel, and we had the core kernel maintainers in the industry that were working on this. Since that time, the other projects that have matured out of that, we've created branded projects that the open source community can work with. So certainly things like Fedora, which is an open source and open project variant of Red Hat Enterprise Linux, all the way through things like OpenShift Origin, which is an open source, open project version of what we're doing in the product OpenShift, where we're maturing developers and working with communities to grow these projects that we then turn into products that we end up supporting. So on the outer side of each of these columns, whether it's Red Hat Enterprise Linux or JBoss middleware through mobile and others, we have a core set of offerings that we work with enterprise customers that we support, that we certify, and that certainly we will stand behind as they scale their environments beyond just the Linux platform. And so this is our core mission, much like Jack Ma was mentioning this morning, and as we're talking about the new academy that was launched, our focus has always been on giving back to the community and making sure that anything we do is open source and is maintained as open source long term. So our vision behind this, though, is to take those open source projects and enable what we call the open hybrid cloud. And our focus certainly started with physical environments. So again, in the early 2000s, when people were buying hardware day in and day out, deploying that through their IT department, they needed a Linux platform on which to run that was certified and built for those hardware platforms. We started there with the major global providers, and then as virtualization matured, whether it was from VMware or Red Hat or others, we certainly certified our platforms on multiple virtualization environments. Well, most recently, our focus has been on how do we grow the private and public cloud and make sure that our products and our platforms are available on those as well. But the most important part behind this is we look at these as having to be consistent across all. So when you deploy one of our platforms on a piece of hardware, it is the same platform you're going to deploy on the public cloud. And this is very important and crucial, so as customers come to us and look at the technologies we provide and what we're deploying, being able to say that they're running the same thing across all of these footprints in this hybrid cloud is crucial to their success, and they don't have to accommodate change across these. Beyond the infrastructure platforms, we certainly invest in storage. We have offerings there, and also application platforms that I'll take you through. But surrounding all this, being able to do management and automation across these, and all the way across developer tooling, these are crucial elements of the cloud. So when you think about Red Hat, don't think of us as just the enterprise Linux company that is working on public or private or hardware or virtualized environment. We're actually much broader than that now with the broadest open source enterprise solution stack in the industry today. So what does this mean? I'll take you through a couple of the key examples of products. Where we really start certainly goes back to Red Hat Enterprise Linux, and this is the foundation of all of our architects and offerings. So whether we're talking about, as you'll hear in a minute, the container platform, or whether you're talking about the private cloud platform, it's all based on what we've done with Red Hat Enterprise Linux. This includes long life cycles, the ability to support those platforms for customers in a 24/7, 365 mechanism, and working with key partners across those. But just as importantly, especially for this audience, this is what we're using as basing for our cloud-based infrastructure platforms and applications. So again, as we start to deploy and as we tell customers, take your applications, move them into the public cloud, it usually starts with a discussion around Red Hat Enterprise Linux, but quickly progresses into some of the other architectural examples on that previous slide. But finally, what we really do here is we make sure that when you deploy Red Hat Enterprise Linux, it works the same, it integrates the same, it has the same security updates, regardless of which of those 4 footprints that you're running on. So we don't introduce change to customers as they start to deploy to these environments. Secondly, if we want to talk about the application platforms, So beyond Red Hat Enterprise Linux, what happens if you want to be able to deploy applications to an application server, or if you've got mobile applications you need to develop? So those two, whether it's a J2EE based platform or a mobile platform, we do have offerings in the market today, and these certainly are consistent on and off premise. But as you look at this, we're also expanding dramatically into the container space. So probably everyone here has heard about Docker. Red Hat has been involved working with Docker since the start, but more importantly, what we've been doing most recently is making sure that the open source community and Red Hat Enterprise Linux are key examples and interfaces into this new world. And one of the platforms that we've launched is OpenShift Container Platform, which is available both on-premise as well as in the public clouds, which is our platform to deploy enterprise cloud applications consistently across these environments. So containerized applications being able to be built and deployed across multiple environments, whether or not you're using microservices architecture or merely porting applications into a container platform. We most recently launched our beta of OpenShift.io, which is our development environment. This is a hosted platform that allows you to develop and use an integrated tool chain for OpenShift. So as you're building these containerized applications, having those built and deployed in a hosted environment spread across OpenShift is crucial. And we see that as, again, part of that application and developer tooling level that you saw on the previous architectural slide. And then if you also look at middleware, so once you get beyond the application platforms and the infrastructure platforms, being able to say to the market and to customers, you can use things such as message queuing systems from Red Hat, all the way through application services, whether it's OpenShift runtimes to provide full runtime environments inside OpenShift for various environments, is all crucial to this. And then have management for business rule and business process management, and then certainly being able to do, for example, a distributed NoSQL database across these environments. These are all crucial to developing the applications as we see them in the industry. And finally, a set of solutions that we have for management and automation, that lower level of the platform, of the architecture that you saw. We certainly have these across all of these environments, from CloudForms, which allows us to actually go in and manage virtual platforms, whether on-premise or off-premise, through certainly playbooks and automation through Ansible, which hopefully a lot of you have heard as well. And you'll see a lot of the projects and famous open source projects in our branding that we have, because we're actually taking what's going on in the community and packaging that up and making it available in a supported, fully enterprise integrated way. So finally, just going back to the architecture and looking at really where we are, we're looking at taking all of these platforms where you see Red Hat now, significant investments both in open source communities and projects across these, and then including Alibaba Cloud as part of this platform. So whether you're on-premise or off-premise in the cloud, it's based upon the same application platforms, infrastructure platforms, and then certainly management and automation across this hybrid cloud architecture. So with that, I appreciate your time, and hopefully you have a good rest of the conference. Thank you.